before we jump into kind of talking about, I guess, what we're going to take you through today, we'll just do a little bit of an intro to the studio itself. So like we said, we're Rowdy Studio. We were founded back in 2010 by our very lovely founder, Lisa Clark. So she actually set up during the last recession, the last big one back in 2010. She made redundant and had always had this plan to kind of want to set up her own agency. So she was like, right, now's the time. So let's get cracking on that. So she started kind of building her network, her client, kind of her roster of clients, kind of really starting kind of to build something that would strive towards building on craft first. And then started as she kind of progressing, really wanting to lean into kind of a more strategic approach, which has kind of led us towards this journey and what we're going to talk you through today. I came on board in 2015, initially as a lead designer, and I was the first official employee. She'd been working with kind of contractors, bit of permalancing, freelancers before that, but I was the first fully instated employee within Rowdy, which was quite exciting coming on board. So I think I was very excited about the factor of looking for working with a female founder, being able to contribute to the business itself and kind of really lead the work in a way. That appealed to me. Also, the fact that Lisa's Irish as well. So we had quite a large client network in Ireland as well. So it meant that I'd kind of get to keep a toe in both places and, occasionally expense trips home as well, which is quite nice when you're able to be like, hey, mom, I'm in Dublin for dinner. So let me pop home. And then since then, we've been growing the team, growing clients, growing everything. So we're now a kind of a full-time team of 8. We've got myself, Lisa, Josh, we've got Tomas, who is senior designer. We've got Ellis, who client partnership. Laura heads up our accounts. Vic is creative artwork, based in Manchester remotely for us. And then Dave is our newest member, and he's going to head up he's taking the lead on the strategy and the verbal aspect of the business. And we also have like a wide roster of freelancers that we work with. We've got great partners in interiors, in development, through illustration, 3D, all of that. But as a team, we're really, I think, quite a strategic bunch. A lot of writers, a lot of illustrators. Josh is hugely invested in typography, a lot of motion skills, mix of UI and UX. So we're quite generalist in that approach. So it's really nice to be able to have that kind of broad mix to be able to call on at any given moment. So we're kind of up for any challenge, any task. We wouldn't say we're sector specific. We've had a lot of great success in hospitality in the past, in property we do quite a bit in, but we really try to be quite broad in that vein. So we've done quite a lot in tech, a bit of education, and we've done like kind of large scale, very corporate professional services to kind of really fun like co-working spaces, done a lot in build to rent, different places and that. So for us, it's really about just finding a great challenge that feels quite meaty with a great client and kind of trying to build a relationship that lasts for quite a long term and not just a single brief. But today we're not going to talk about through our client work. We're actually here to talk about this lovely piece.
Yeah, finding noise and order. So what it is, how we found it, and what it means to us. First things first, what is noise and order? So that's a fair question, and it's pretty much the first thing I asked while I was freelancing with Rowdy. It was a term that's being used by all members of the team in all sorts of situations, and it's kind of ranging from like proposal strategy to client relationships to critical feedback. And I kind of felt like it was being said like under people's breath in a sort of like reverential tone, like quite not secretive, but like I think that was just like a memory because in reality it was already openly discussed. But after a while, I picked up the courage to ask, what actually is noise and order? I keep hearing this like bouncing around. And I was told that it was like a single unifying philosophy and process that underpins Rowdy's approach, which is why I've grandly called it here the Rowdy philosophy. And I think that having been in the industry for like a little while, I've come into contact with some of these phrases before, whether or not it's describing a unique mission or a unique approach to branding or how this or that particular studio will like change the world, normally for the better, and to much critical acclaim. And after a while, I find like personally, it can get a little bit high-minded, and as a designer, let alone a client, it can be easy to lose track a little bit what these positioning statements mean, who they're for, or even if they have a purpose. Like you hear them a lot and you're going, okay, and you sort of like tune out a little bit. But what I realized about noise and order at the time was something, it was to do with its simplicity and how it kind of underpins everything we do as a studio. And it's really easy to communicate to clients, and it applies to feedback on project work. And it's actually a really simple illustration of our studio's approach to design challenges. I think that when we were discussing what value we could do to this, sort of bring to this workshop, felt like rather than talking through a single branding project, it'd actually be really more interesting to discuss one of the toughest challenges that any branding agency can take on, rebranding yourselves. So I wasn't with Rowdy at the conception of noise and order. Obviously, I only joined 18 months ago, and this was a little bit of time before. But when Hallie asked me to be involved in this workshop, I think the most value I felt I could bring is to just ask the same questions I asked when I first joined. And then any takeaways that landed following Hallie's very patient answers, I felt I could also be quite nice to like summarize. So yeah, we could really like land like what were the kind of like takeaways from that process. So first things first, Hallie,
Yes.
why did we rebrand?
So very good question. So we're going to take you back to 2020, which is 4 years ago, obviously. So I think a lot of people remember that for the summer of the wonderful pandemic that we all had to live through. Also the fact that it was really hot and actually a really great summer compared to this one. But for us, it was really about cementing a very strategic shift in the direction of the business. So where were we? So it's always so funny showing this stuff. We go, oh my God, where we were. So we were really, I think at the time, in terms of like a visual identity, we had a color, we had a very poppy logo, but that was kind of the breadth of it. In terms of our work, we were starting to win some really big projects, some really meaty, like proper branding projects, all the way through strategy, the design, the kind of activation of it, as well as kind of a little more kind of longer term clients that we'd had that were very much more of a graphic design output. But we were a bit of a one-stop shop. We had a really great name, but we hadn't really fully explored the definition of it. We had a really great team, kind of a lot of great energy in the room and a real good sense of drive towards wanting to create something. But we were very inconsistent in how we were talking about ourselves externally. It's the balance of, when you're building a business, right? Do you lean into a sector? Do you kind of take the opportunities that will kind of get you there so that you can build and kind of grow from it and kind of we were at a place where, we had a really strong kind of robust business of how it was operating. It was really about trying to elevate that and push that forward. So for us, it was really about trying to set out and achieve defining a new era. So really try to make our positioning, what we're going to represent, more enduring and consistent. We really wanted to position ourselves as strategic, not just be, good graphic design or good at kind of doing nice identities. It was about actually we can solve the problems, we can identify the problems and help navigate that journey with clients as well. Using all that to really just refresh our process and kind of look at, okay, well, how are we building this for clients? What's great for the team? What's going to get the best out of us? What's going to produce the best results? Ultimately connect with talent, because it's the talent that makes the work happen. So create something that people are going to be drawn to, something that is going to resonate with people and something we can all kind of gravitate around. And ultimately, it's also about, like, there's a business need there, right? We have to support growth in this. It's about pushing the business, trying to increase the amount of clients, increase the worth of the projects that we're getting. That lets us build a team, that lets us push it further, and we all get kind of great things out of that. So a bit of context for the landscape that we were in at the time. So at the time, these are kind of some of the existing stats that were there. About 78,030 design agencies within the UK alone, increasing over the kind of the 10 years by about 62%. So there's a lot of people in the game. There's a lot of kind of, there's different disciplines within all of that, but there's also an awful lot of overlap. So we'll get people who will go up and will be quite direct competitors, but then we're also competing against, say, we might get, advertising agencies who are able to step into brand, or if you're working on a web project, we're a brand agency that can do web, but are competing with like pure web agencies. So there's a lot of crossover, a lot of disciplines, a lot of people trying to share the same kind of offers and steal their own kind of slice of the market. And also within that, there is the client conversation. So ultimately, they're always asking, look, what do I get for this? Like, what are the actual services that you're offering? What am I going to get handed to me at the end? What's that, journey going to look like? What are all the different components on it? So the actual service and the process surrounding that, and also how much is it going to cost? Cost is an inevitable factor in all of this. So budgets matter, how we adapt those are part of that. But they're the things that we're always going to be competing on against. There is an element of a bit of a like for like sometimes in terms of process and offer, and also everyone looking at what's the figure. So they're all the kind of challenges that we start to navigate within that landscape. But beyond things like, say hygiene factors, they're like, who am I working with? What are the stages? What are the timelines? What are the budgets? The kind of general expectations that are from every client to every agency, and the kind of latest trends, the latest, the things that are becoming very kind of the now in terms of approaches to strategy, to design, to all of these elements. The thing that really starts to resonate and help you kind of elevate above that is having a unique internal approach and a style of working that's going to drive that conversion of kind of, basically, and by conversion, we mean getting the client in and kind of getting the project started. So for us, it was about finding that effectively, what's our perspective? What can we drive that down to? Like, what matters to us? You know, what do we want to be known for? What do we really want the journey to that reputation be about? And kind of starting to really, really explore that. And that's because, yeah.
Yeah, so this takes us to our first takeaway. Why should an agency rebrand? Well, it's not just for the crack. For the uninitiated, crack is fun in Irish. Yeah. And it was something that really stood out for me when I was talking directly with Hallie. And at the end of like a very impassioned explanation regarding the benefits of a meaningful studio identity, she was like, well, you know, it's not just for the crack. And I was thinking how it could function beyond a bright and poppy color and a fun logotype and the opportunities it could open up like that. There are so many reasons to do it that are beyond just like the aesthetics. You know, there are strategic reasons and goals, you know, so obviously like, including business growth, and that mean that having a unique identity is integral to the growth of your business and like the kind of culture of the team. Yeah, so you're not just doing it for fun, really, although it can be fun. So right, we know we need a rebrand. We know there's sizable competition out there. So my next question is, where do we begin?
So we go back a little bit to this slide that Josh had earlier. So this easy to get lost in the noise. Obviously, as we said before, there's a lot of people in the space. There's a lot of people that we're competing with, and you can start to slice that into like different components of, you know, this set of agencies might be seen as direct competitors based on size and scale and all those things. But we start working through all of that. There's just a lot. So ultimately, it's finding clarity is the kind of very beginning stages of that. And the steps that we would have taken to do that, we had actually mentioned here that so at the time we'd just made our first like official strategist hire of actually not just having a room of strategic thinkers, but I'm working with freelancers, but being right, we're committing to this aspect of it and bringing this person in. And the benefit of that timing was that this was his first project that he worked with us. So he was able to, Will Basanko is his name, and he was able to really almost pretend we were like a client, and kind of he wasn't fully embedded in us. He was able to come up with a very fresh perspective. So that was a really great opportunity for us. So in terms of that journey, it's about getting that clarity and position. Okay, what are we going to own? What's our perspective? That's going to give us the clarity in the content. So everything that we put out then becomes ladders back to that. When that's really clear, there's clarity for the client, you know, clarity for talent, clarity for anyone looking at that. They understand what we do, they understand why we do it, and they understand, you know, the work that comes from that. Get all those things right, and, you know, the hope, the idea is that that's what leads to Rowdy growth and also presence, you know, raising our profile, raising our reputation. And within all of that process, you know, he would have done a lot of research, looking, you know, across the landscape, across the category, across the client's needs, across kind of expectations of just industry, you know, kind of globally of where things, the directions that things were taken. And also for us, kind of interviewing all of us individually, running a workshop with us, really trying to delve into kind of different aspects of the business and everywhere the business could probably hit. So there was three kind of three insights that you could really pull that can be divided up into, like say, first is the category. So it's about amplifying what's unique. So you've got massive agency saturation. You've got, you know, at the time we were heading into the pandemic, so no one really knew what was going to come out of that. So a lot of uncertainty. So a lot of kind of hesitancy around, you know, committing to work. You know, what's that going to really impact for us just across absolutely everything, you know, how people remote working, like what products are going to be actually useful anymore? How long is this going to last? So quite a difficult time to be in. But knowing that within that, like there's a sea of sameness in the sector. So a lot of firms feel very familiar. There's a lot of the same language as Josh spoke to. So how can we really start to, you know, define what's unique and then amplify it? And that's by sourcing the most authentic and meaningful way for us to distinguish and connect. So that could be through our internal approach. It could be around the distinct mindset of our clients, or also could be around our output. So the next insight is around audience. So demonstrating how we deliver. So the needs and kind of expectations of clients are always evolving. Increasingly, you know, they're looking for more flexibility. They want real transparency. You know, the more kind of traditional styles of working are being massively challenged and massively changed. And we're only seeing that accelerate since we've gone through that process, especially around, you know, remote working has changed. Just Zoom calls have changed how we do anything now. So kind of being able to adapt to that and kind of being able to demonstrate that sense of flexibility in process, you know, how we build briefs and we build scope and we build kind of projects kind of individually for clients rather than being too like set in a certain like has to be done through this clear process. Otherwise, you know, it can't work. And then also beyond the case studies, beyond the talent that we have in the room, clients are really looking to see how do we understand, how do we engage with their challenge? Do we have the right approach? Do we have the right engagement from the team in really understanding what it is, seeing the opportunity, and also knowing that they can trust us to get them from that problem to the solution? And the third is around the company. So really about wanting to supercharge that new era. So we knew we had knowledge and we had experience in certain sectors, but from talking to clients and from the kind of work that we'd had up to then, we were kind of, in terms of their perceptions of us, we were being a bit firmly placed in that field of kind of design and execution. And when we knew we had a really strong kind of strategy offer with that. So it's about really kind of bringing that to the front and kind of helping that kind of charge how we move forward. So we also have a really vibrant and dynamic team. We also had a great name that we all loved, that felt like we weren't doing a lot with. So how do we start to bring that rowdiness out through everything we do? So this is about taking the time to really cement that approach, streamline processes, and prepare for that next era. The idea is, you put all these things in an overlap, and hopefully at the center of that, that's where you find what became known as the Rowdy 2.0 project for some reason internally. But that's really what this is about finding. It's about getting to the absolute core of that piece and then letting everything ladder out from that. And the idea then that will shift us. So instead of claiming that we can kind of do anything and everything in that one-stop shop feeling, it's really about showcasing, well, what's the best thing that we can do and what's really going to resonate and really going to give us that growth, instead of kind of trying to target everyone and kind of build up, you're trying to, you're looking to kind of, you need business and need to run on something. So trying to build up a roster of clients, trying to expand the network, get bigger projects in the door. It's about now being a lot more kind of specific in our outreach. So how do we target certain things? What are the challenges that we really see the opportunity in? And what are the things that also bring the team the joy in the work? What are we really interested in solving, and what does that look like? From a bit of a chop and change process to something that feels a lot more streamlined, something that has flexibility in it. But again, there's a kind of a very clear kind of a flow through it. That is something that can be a bit more ownable. Instead of focusing on what and how, more on why. Why do we exist? What's our drive? What's our perspective? And moving away from being seen as this like small design studio to really being seen as a really strategic firm.
And I think that's like what brought me to takeaway two really is it's really important to be honest when you're in these situations, and it's very difficult to sit back and self-assess and to really, whether it's self-analyze or to kind of even sometimes just own up a little bit to where you are, because it's easy to look at your competition and draw maybe unrealistic comparisons or get a bit overwhelmed or just to end up like contributing to the noise. And I think if you're honest about where you are in your journey or who your clients are, or what your realistic next steps are, not just like where you kind of fancifully would be in a year's time if you could have like 100 people working for you. I think they're the really useful parameters that will not only like define your unique audience, but they can have like guardrails to expedite the process. So yeah, if you're not like a 100-person powerhouse, so maybe you'd be like an agile expert, just as an example. So I think it's really important to know your audience and to know yourself and to draw conclusions on what changes you can make to make the service feel better. But obviously that's a lot of big talk, and that's easy to say. So this is the big one. How did we find our voice?
So I'm going to start with kind of thought starters. So through the process that Will would have taken, as I said, he did workshops, he interviewed us all, he did all his research. And what he brought to the room when we first went through it was he kind of did a bit of a playback of all of that to do a bit of context setting, which is some of the stuff you've already seen. But the kind of most exciting kind of moment was this slide that he put together. So he divided into three kind of areas of internal culture, client mindset, and output. And he just put together a lot of headlines and was like, right, how do these sit? What resonates? What feels really good? What feels relevant? To kind of help us see, like, are we in, which bucket are we sitting in, first of all? And also, is there anything that feels really, yes, or also no? Is there anything we're definitely not that, and that doesn't fit? And we all kind of, gave our opinions. And one thing that everyone was really drawn to straight away was noise and order. There was an instant kind of gut reaction to it of going, oh, that feels really exciting. There's something really interesting in that. Also that kind of loud ideas, sound strategy, the kind of blend of two things kind of knocking against each other, a little bit around the idea of disturbing the peace. Brands first, success second, kind of brands ready for the next, brands that start conversations. These were all the things that felt like it was that sense of, there's tension,
yeah.
and then kind of like a momentum that really came out in the room. So we kind of tested noise and order against a couple more things. We went through a few different rounds where this kind of got refined, but every time we still came back to the idea of noise and order. It was something that was hit like really at the beginning stages and just felt so right. And when we sat with it, you know, over, I think there was probably a week or two of kind of maybe 3 of really kind of developing it in terms of timeline, that just, yeah, it just sat and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger in our minds. So ultimately that became the center heart of our platform. And then the next thing we'll did would translate that into a bit of a why, how, what. So why do we exist? We exist to bring noise and order to strategic brand building. How we go about our business. So we blend sound strategy with loud ideas to build brands and experiences that challenge expectation and drive business results. And what we do, we're a full service agency specializing in brand strategy, design and activation, working with clients to define their proposition and unlock their potential. So simply put, that makes our positioning at Rowdy. We use noise and order to unlock brand potential. So really seeing noise and order as something, it's a tool, it's a philosophy, it's a way of, a lens of looking at things. And then talking about that idea of potential. I think we talk a lot about potential, actually, a lot in it, that we all get really excited about that. It's like, what could this be? And then, you know, you've got the context, you've got kind of certain barriers and parameters and stuff that you need to work within, but it's the excitement of the unknown that really kind of gets us all going, of like, oh, there's so much that could be here. And it's not just the project, it's the client, of like where they're at now versus 3 years versus 10 years. So that's what really, really drives us as well. And then the next step he did was to translate our culture into an actual line, how we could define it. And that became, we are the loud thinkers. And what I really love about this, I think it really speaks to the fact that we are very much about like what's happening in your brain, not so much about your ego. We're about, you know, sharing our thinking, really chewing the fat together and stuff. We try to invite input. We also really respect that people have different ways of showing up. So, you know, some people are great in a brainstorm straight off the bat, you know, loud voices, like on the minute, like, yeah, idea. And other people need to sit back, just absorb, take it away and come back with stuff. And we really try to balance those two things as well. So all of that sense of like letting what's happening in your brain and the kind of process that you go to be the loudest thing that speaks. We're also incredibly curious about the world around us, as most creatives are, and we're very considerate in how we approach things. We really try to be quite, you know, it's, you know, realistic, practical, pragmatic with the clients as well, because we want to do the best job that we can do while also respecting sometimes where they're at, and just be realistic on expectations as well, so that we're not, you know, overwhelming, or we're kind of, you know, you're almost failing at the first hurdle if you can't quite work within that. So just all those kind of things kind of contributing to that. So I think that we are the loud thinkers really kind of summed us up. And the next step is then translating that into values for us. So we've got logic lovers, so that's the more practical piece. So we do the legwork, we know our stuff. Daring dreamers, excuse me. The emotional side of it, so challenging the norm and daring to think differently. And being goal getters, so we're ambitious, we're relentless in helping our clients achieve. We're real grafters, proper like roll up the sleeves, everyone gets stuck in and kind of moves the work forward. And then how that translates into a tone of voice. So how we write, how we sound when we're, you know, in the room with the client, how we try to kind of communicate ourselves. First, it's about being real. We are very human, but not immature. We're conversational, but not unprofessional. Try to be really, really approachable, but not overly familiar. We're ready. We are, oh, my thing is moving. There we go. Oh, you've got a backwards mouse. It throws me every time. Sorry. So ready. So it's about being smart, but not boastful, assured, but not overconfident, well-informed, but not arrogant. And then relentless. It's about being passionate, but not overbearing, excuse me, and spirited, but not insincere. And also really determined, but not impatient, to make things look great. There you go. Onto your takeaway. Sorry, clicks, builds, being thrown. Sorry.
So yeah, the takeaway 3 really was what we both collectively came up with this one, but know your why. So it's obviously really important to establish what you're trying to achieve, and it can be really easy to get lost in how you do it and what it gets you. But I think the power lies in like digging further back and figure out what's driving you, what your perspective is. And once you have that knowledge, you kind of have the lens through which you can view everything. And then everything can ladder back to it, and it becomes like a compass that's like directs you forward. And I think this process, I think to a lot of people will be quite familiar with how you approach other clients, and you know, when you're working externally. But I think that level of honesty is really helpful to then, as I was speaking to before, like figure out like who you are, and then how that can kind of like drive you forward in your own kind of like unique perspective. So yeah, now we know our why. Now we get to the really, really hard part, which I said was last time, but this is the really hard part. Obviously, amongst client work and deadlines and resources and restraints, as a small studio, how do we make it happen?
So this well, it's the hardest part. So we had Noise and Order, right? We had a great brand idea. We had something that we felt was really going to supercharge us creatively. It felt really strategic in approach. It really spoke to things that mattered to us. But what we didn't have was a lot of time and a lot of people. So at the time, we were myself, Lisa, Ellis, Will, and then me and Georgia. Sorry, I said me already, but Georgia as well being our kind of lead designer in that space. So myself and Georgia would have worked a lot on the visual together. The hardest thing with all of this was we're doing that within a full roster of client work. So you're not getting the beauty of like you have with a client project where you've got a clear set of time. You might have a 3-month project. You know, you might have like, you know, even if you've got like 2 solid weeks on this, you get that space. We're stealing time within the studio for this. So it's, you know, 2 days here, it's a day here, it's half a day here. So having to be very, very realistic about, okay, you know, as my dad always says, and I feel so old saying this now, but, you know, the cobbler's kids always go barefoot. And I think if you've worked in any agency experience, you probably, it's quite universal. I think doing the agency stuff always gets put on the back burner because client work comes first. So what we had to do was be really like, okay, we can't be too precious about process here. We can't be too, you know, trying to be like aim to ladder up to get like an amazing design system with perfect guidelines and all that. This is about getting a really strong foundation to get us started. And we're going to evolve this over time and recognize that this is a long-term, it's a marathon. It's not like this kind of, you know, all compressed into one quick timeline. Because if we did all that and tried to do, I think, too much in that time, I think ultimately we probably wouldn't have gotten to where we are now. So just taking that approach to it. So first thing we started was Noise and Order. What are all the connotations that come around with that? What does it relate to? What does it represent? You know, order, it's like systems, is it clean? Is it like really simplified? You know, there's steps, there's clarity. Noise is really disruptive. It's kind of, it's heard, it's loud, it's got impact. It's maybe a bit unpredictable. It's about volume, you know, or is it being about the polar opposite of that, being very quiet? Like, how do you play in that space? And there's also other things to consider. So one, who's actually going to engage with this and when? So we looked at that in terms of audience. We've got our clients. So it's the relationships that we're building. So the ongoing conversations, how do we show up in those moments? It's the opportunity. How are we pitching ourselves? So what's the big sell for us? With talent, how do we convince people to apply to us? You know, how do we sell ourselves as an agency that's worth joining and somewhere that you feel like you can grow with? How do we inspire the team internally? How do we maintain that and kind of keep building on that? In terms of industry, how do we make more connections in terms of kind of platforms like this? You know, how do we get a wider voice out there? How do we get recognition for what we do? And also about us, how do we grow? How do we communicate that growth internally? How do we make it happen? How do we celebrate it? All the kind of the big pats on the backs, the big, you know, the big strides that we make, how do we bring that to life? And then also when you think about the application, so there's, you know, obviously there's like the website and then there's, you know, how we do our case studies and there's our social profiles, but there's also the things like our face-to-face, right? In the room, how do we present ourselves? How do we speak? How does it look? How do our actual presentations look? What's the page furniture? Do we have the logo on the page when it's the client work? Do we not? All of those decisions. And also knowing that Zoom was becoming more prevalent, we're now in a digital experience where you don't get the full weight of like, you know, the body language and the experience of coming into the studio and, you know, how do, you know, what biscuits do we pick to put on the table? Like all things like that kind of matter. Of course, our portfolio is a big piece. You know, how does it look on our website? How do we talk about the work? How do we talk about the challenge? How do we talk about what we did? How do we represent that? How does that show up on our profiles across social? Also direct. So how do we, you know, when we're sending PDFs over, what's the tone? What do our email signatures look like? What do the PDFs actually look like? We do recordings, like what's the setup for that? And also the snapshot moments. So if someone just sees an Instagram post pop up and like, ooh, who are they? What, that looks interesting, or that project looks interesting, or a white paper on LinkedIn, or a bit of an insight. All of those things shape the lens that we need to kind of consider for this. So it's not just about like, how do we make this look really cool or look really great or look really exciting for us? It's about really considering the practical applications within that as well. So we did first, which I think a lot of people do, is we did a big broad spread of just looking for references. Okay, what's interesting? What feels some way connected to Noise and Order? And, you know, as we started to kind of digest those down, we really felt we were leaning into kind of three territories: around character, around contrast, and around statement. And the next step that what we tried to do is take some of those references and start to put them on a scale from order to noise. So how does character show up in a very ordered way? How does it show up in a very noisy way? So, you know, with character, it's about finding like the little moments, and like maybe it's just a hint of typography, where the kind of, you know, is it through imagery? Does type start to get more playful? Does it just have small movements? Does it start to almost disassemble around a page? Do we start to become almost a character? Like, is there a personality? Is it like a very much like a very human kind of driven representation of that? Is it about having a very, you know, strong illustration style? Is it like really trying to bring it to life? The second, the contrast, you know, at the order end of the scale, being very clear on that. Is it just black and white? Is it very clean, consistent? Is it about clashing colors? Is it about creating, you know, a sense of movement, a sense of scale, different types of typography mixing from something that's very clean cut sans serif to something that's very hand drawn? How disruptive can we then start to make it feel, like something that feels very ordered and very thing, and then just been burst through, really heavily disrupted, getting really, really playful and kind of really increasing the volume there. Through to statement. So, you know, is it about tone of voice? Is it about the actual words that we put down on the page and just being very clean? Is it about playing with punctuation? Is it about using like typography in a way that's very kind of just statement driven, you know, really playful, really loud, very large scale? Is it about increasing that kind of level of movement? Does it move around the page? Is it very disruptive? Do we have a very, very strong sense of, you know, our kind of art direction style? Do we get really, really, really kind of noisy and interesting and kind of very changeable? Do we have constantly changing kind of opinions on things, and how does that start to change? So we did a lot of play with this. We also kind of played around with trying to put, you know, some kind of, you know, competition agencies on scales as well, to kind of understand like how we could, you know, is there a noise and order generally in everything that we do, which was a lot of fun. So we would have done that quite quickly and kind of moved through and constantly had a group conversation then around that. And ultimately, four things that really kind of came out from that process that were kind of helped navigate it was around one, high contrast. We felt that worked really well to really be on the nose, to kind of nod to noise and order, that sense of the contrast between those two. We love the fact that our name is Rowdy, and that feels quite playful, and we're quite, you know, we're very relaxed and conversational with clients. There is a lot of kind of silliness in the team as well, but we really wanted to be.
Do you need to look quite hard at me then?
Yeah. You know, we need that cheekiness to be discreet. We do want to be a lot more kind of, I think we want it to be quite mature and quite grown up as well. That sense of the verbal also acting as a visual. So, you know, playing with how words look and not just what they say. And there was a little element of the kind of the girl boss watch out. You know, we are female founded, female creative director, which is, you know, really, really important, but we definitely didn't want to be accidentally step into your, you know, stereotype kind of feminine, like your pinks, and kind of being too, I think, you know,
doesn't define.
Yeah. So we were just kind of conscious of that, of making sure that didn't come through. So the next step, we've got a little thing that's going to flip through a load of stuff here. In the spirit of that speed, because we didn't have that time, we didn't look to produce like really fully rounded concepts that we would do for a client. It was very much about going, okay, quick explorers, let's mock it up, let's get it into that sense of scale. Does it feel right? You know, really trying to kind of benchmark is like, look, how bright is this? How playful are we going to be? How slick do we need to be? And really kind of looking to get that really core foundation level that was going to be a really great platform to kind of start building for us. And what really stood out in all of that was this little guy, this or R, as you say it. I say or for anyone who's asking. So when I say or, I mean R. It's the Irish in me. Because what really felt right about this was it was really clean, really controlled. So it had that sense of order, but it also had a really sense of strong character to the type itself. And we started playing with the kind of the elements of it, the counter, and kind of moving these around. And that just felt like it had a little bit of that noisy play in it. So we took that as a starting point, and we played with a few different typefaces, but we ultimately felt like it was Stravinsky. That felt like a really bold, high contrast typeface that had to, you know, to be very careful about where you use it for legibility, but it felt like it could be really impactful. And we started to just play with letters. Okay, how does it stretch? Does it stretch up? Does it stretch down? Does it stretch left and right? What are some of the rules that we can start to put in place in that to kind of really have that sense of noise, but how do we be very ordered in how we approach it? The same with our word mark and our icon. We did hundreds of versions of the OR of trying to find the right just the right level of movement. Like, how much do we change it? How much do we push it? How much do we play with the scale? You know, the foot of it, like adding elements to it, taking things away. The same with our word mark. How do we play into that stretch and trying to build it through that? And then playing with that in context. So the moments like covers, dividers, all of those little details that will be present through all presentations, all those kind of daily consistent events, trying to get those moments really nailed in terms of, well, how are they going to show up, and kind of start to build that kind of the beginnings of that kind of typographic system for us. So we played a lot with how it kind of sits. Is it very blocky? Is it just centered? You know, is it left aligned? Is it right aligned? Do we crop it? Do we pull it? You know, how much do we break the word up in terms of legibility? Can you still read it? Or are we totally happy to just make it more of a visual device? And the same with color. Really trying to explore, and I think again this is just a small snapshot of George's very large illustrator board of all wonderful combinations. But you know, we felt strongly that black and white was a great way to be very immediate in terms of like order and clarity. But is it about bringing in one extra color? Is it going really having a neon palette? Is it more muted tones? Like, what's the balance of play within that? And how do we start to bring that to life and kind of identify what feels right for us? So through all of that, you know, lots and lots of kind of exploration that we would have done it. We landed here. So in terms of our name, so, you know, when we're on the very order end of the scale, we're Rowdy Studio, we're writing in Degular. And then as we start to kind of move up the scale, we're moving towards like our lovely little icon, and then our word mark associated with it as well, which is quite, you know, it's got the contrast in it. It's got the statement of character, but it's very clean. And then it starts to stretch. So you've got that movement towards the noise end. The same with color. So when we're looking at things like, you know, like proposals, like when it's scope, when it's all about clarity for the client of what we're doing, when they need to be able to understand the detail, we're black and white, you know, using Degular as our kind of a lead typeface there, making sure that it all sings to that sense of order and clarity. Then we can start to be a little bit more kind of playful with that. So leaning into Stravinsky a little bit more to say something like presenting a brand platform, which is really about the words on the page, but you can start to bring in a bit of color. You can use dividers to help organize pages. And then when we're really noisy, when it's, you know, across our own social or our own perspective or our own opinions, and when we're being really playful with it, we've got a wider range of colors that are quite, you know, they're warm and they're playful and they're poppy. And then we've got that lovely stretch device that translates through everything. So that was where we landed.
So yeah, bringing it back to our question about like, how did we get it done? Takeaway number 4, just do it, which I'm pretty sure is some sports brand's name or something or other. But yeah, when times are tight or resources slim, it's really easy to let things fall by the wayside. I think when you've got the ideas, but like imposter syndrome can kick in, or like paralyzing perfectionism. I know that I find that a lot, especially, you know, when it's my own work as well. There's this sort of temptation to leave it to tomorrow when like everything feels right, or when you're in the right zone, or when I mean, we had talking to earlier, when client work like feels like it's maybe at an ebb, or you know, your cat's feeling poorly, or you gotta like, you're trying to find exactly the right time for it, but the reality is you do just have to like step up and just get on with it and like create time for yourself, like create structure, create parameters. Yeah, because rebranding a client is one thing, because you know they have those parameters that they keep providing you, like they have client concerns or they have limits on resources, like, but theoretically yours are like unlimited, and that can be quite scary. But yeah, you just have to start. So that was takeaway number 4, and then the takeaway number 5. And this is another really important one that I've been very much trying to get hold of recently. It's about evolve, don't solve. I feel really strongly about this. And I think there's an understanding that your identity is as living and breathing as you are, really, and that there's no fixed answer. So there'll never be a permanent solution. So the most important thing is just to like get it out there. Because yeah, perfection and procrastination can be great bedfellows. And yeah, so you just have to sort of like do enough to launch it out into the world, recognizing that brands don't have a deadline and that they will continue to kind of grow and to evolve, and that the task is to maintain that evolution, and figure out how to provide a platform for what's coming down the line. Yeah, otherwise you'll never pull the trigger on it and it'll never get out there. So leading on to that, where are we now?
Where are we now? We believe in noise and order. So I guess the initial kind of set of assets that we would have created in terms of practical pieces, we had a lot of this kind of moving kind of topography, whether that's, you know, around noise and order, whether it's client names, whether it's our names, kind of playing into that space so we can create lovely moments within presentations or across the website that kind of reflects that noise and order very succinctly. So we've got very clear rules around it. They always stretch left and right. They're never up and down. Kind of we can play with the kind of the counters and kind of bowls within in elements, but it's quite, limited. It's about making sure you can still understand it, but have that real sense of stretch and play within it. We also have kind of different versions. We've used different versions of this over the years of how we talk about noise and order to clients. So we really speak to them about, it's the idea of having kind of, brand has edges, it has kind of boundaries. There's if you are a, like, I don't know, if you're a friendly brand, you're friendly to a certain point, right? That definition of friendly has an edge to it. It's not like super over familiar. It might be like, we're warm. So helping them kind of understand where that sits. And also they kind of get this as a process, because we can talk about the noise being, look, this is your out of home, this is your big billboard moment, but the order is the practicality that makes it work. It's the PowerPoint templates that you use internally, it's the email signatures, it's the structure and the support and the system and the rules that ensure the noise can happen. And they really resonate that. It's been really, really effective in kind of explaining process and explaining kind of wider challenges within that. But it's also a little bit kind of creative and a little bit abstract enough to be interesting, and it generates a lot of curiosity. So it works for us really well in those kind of ways.
And then, throwing it back to our own branding and our own communications, like you can see how in this example, in this white paper, there's loads of color, like it's really punchy. There's a lot going on. We've really, really dialed up the noise. We're trying to kind of get that level of attention, level of engagement, trying to really like build those relationships. Whereas maybe with a proposal, it's quieter, like very like black and white. And you can see how like there's a flex in how we're using our visual language. So it's very important to practice what you preach in terms of the clients, because I think that with us, like it'd be very tempting to throw like this like very expressive typography across everything. Like internally, sometimes you just need it to be like clean and clear and simple, but sometimes you really do want to turn that up. But obviously, we recognise that our branding isn't going to be everywhere, and even though on the left you can see here how it's working quite well as a system, like whether it's through the typography or through the color, it's very loud. On the right, it also applies to sort of strategy as well as activation for the client. So it might be the case that we're really like dialing up the kind of the thinking behind it in terms of the noise, or we're dialing up the design, or whether we're dialing up or dialing down the activation of it. And that kind of level of thinking, it's the same across both internal, like our branding, and when we're working with the client. And then I also wanted to include this slide as well, because there can be more playful expressions of noise and order as well. So you can see on the left, there's like a bit of order in direction in terms of the travel. Sorry, there's order in terms of the direction of travel, but the noise is where it stretches out. Or on the right, like there's order in the static, but then there's like noise and emotion. And I think like I don't want to be like a fundamentalist about it, but I like the fact it can kind of like permeate through everything, and like it kind of has its little claws across all the other touch points, and it serves as a really nice foundation for how we approach projects both externally and internally.
Yeah. And another way it also helps is we do this a lot with kind of context setting. So when you're talking through a challenge or an opportunity with clients, especially if we are looking to, win work, or we're going through strategy, it's about talking about big themes and being able to kind of break them down into the noise and order tensions between those. So, something might need to, might want to like really elevate an experience, but you also have to live in the real world. So what are the practicalities of making sure that can happen, so that you're not kind of going with some like, massive, when it's all blue sky thinking and you can do whatever you want. It's like, what are we actually able to do within the time frame, the budget, all of these considerations. Understanding that the possibilities are really, really exciting about something, but the need is really important. So there's everything that we could do, but what does the audience actually need? What are the requirements for this? This kind of thing really matters in things like property. When you're looking towards placemaking, there's a very clear need around the area of the facilities, the services that are being put in place. So how do you make sure all of those things are clearly communicated, while also creating that sense of elevation and that sense of innovation and pushing forward? And again, it's that sense of, shouting from a billboard, but also working really plainly on something like a floor plan or a fact sheet or something very clear. And it also helps to, click there, kind of build up and frame creative. So when we're moving from that kind of strategic process into then starting to share concepts and ideas and how's this all going to look, we can nod to that strategic thinking, and we can kind of hit all those notes of the context that matters, relating back to the challenge, the opportunity, and kind of warm people in the room up to how the creative is going to come to life. So this would have been one that we did for a hotel pitch, not about 2 years ago maybe. But it's that sense of our voice needs to carry, but it's boorish to shout. stylish as a state of mind, but it shouldn't have to try. So finding the noise and order within the kind of the brief and within the parameters that we need to work in as well, which works really nicely.
And I think for me, joining Rowdy as well, it was really helpful to, it helped me elevate and hone the way that I kind of approach design as a whole. Like, actually worked as a kind of fundamental design principle where, I mean, this is a great example where you've got like the recessive on the left and the expressive on the right. And that's, you can see like our order to our noise. And there are moments where, as Hallie was saying before, you want to shout from the billboards, you want to be using your big hero asset, but you can't be using that everywhere. Like, sometimes you're going to have to make a PowerPoint or an email template, and it's not the most exciting thing, but you have to learn how to bring that language through all facets and all applications, whether or not they're the really fun, exciting stuff or the quite sort of boring, plain things, which frankly oftentimes makes us like most of the money. So I think it's really important to like understand how this scale works, and the fact that it's kind of baked into our philosophy is really helpful, both as a designer and when explaining it to clients, because sometimes, you know, you have a client, and we call it like having a noise client or an order client, where, you know, they come with these right grand big ideas, but they're not recognizing that actually they need some order to kind of like function in a more coherent and consistent way, because they're making too much noise and it's not really very easy for their audience to understand them. Or you've got a client that comes to you and they're very ordered and they're not really recognizing that actually there's opportunity to push, there's opportunity to build and work outside of what their current parameters are or within their sector, and you're bringing that element of excitement that they might not necessarily have. And I mean, and there's a term as well that Hallie likes to talk about, which is about avoiding the hero asset being everywhere, and how you have to be really careful that you don't just like create a campaign and, you know, you're not just using it in a sense of like, you know, you have got one asset that they're just plonked everywhere. Like, you know, the classic, you can't just stick a logo on everything, call it a brand.
Yeah. Something that everyone gets really excited about in the room, but in 6 months it's tired.
Yeah.
It's overused. So trying to move away from that.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. And thank you for bearing with us for all these takeaways. Percolate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get to that word actually.
To get to that word. I mean, I use the word permeate, but I think percolate is probably slightly better because it kind of implies that there's like a sifting through of ideas, and it feels a bit more like thoughtful.
Yeah, and we like coffee.
We like coffee, but yeah, I mean, it's to do with like the power of the brand idea translating through everything that we do, and sort of using it as a lens to like examine sort of everything, really, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it's kind of it's kind of had its own life, really. It's just brewed in the background through everything that we've done, and it's become so much bigger and more than I think we ever anticipated. But I think that's probably the power of that brand idea, right? It's something that filtrates through everything, and it finds its own way. You know, we use it so much, and we even start, when you start like, you know, bringing the teams together, as Josh was saying, it's like, oh, balancing noise and order within that, and it's something that can be above us and not something that's very rigid. So we can kind of always lean on that as the kind of overarching philosophy, so that we're not, you know, it's not about one person, it's about how do we, you know, make a noisy, orderly team in that way. So it's just worked, right? It's been such a lovely thing to bring through. It's not just a nice line, it's something that actually the whole studio,
doesn't it?
Yeah, and you can really start, it helps people step back as well. You go, okay, look, if this is a noise or order problem, like, where are we sitting? Why is that important? And going through.
So what's next?
So what's next? So we're working on actually the next iteration of Rowdy 3.0. I don't know. Still very much noise and order, but we're kind of, it's just the next evolution of that, which we'll be kind of sharing over the coming kind of months and kind of year or so. So we're really excited to see that come to life. But it's really something that's become more, it's become more behavioral and experience driven. It's become something that is very cultural, and kind of really, you know, it's just so much stronger, as we were saying, than it was when it first got started, which is really, really exciting for us. So yeah, excited to share it all. So thank you.